Well, hello there, and welcome back to another Measure Master live training. My name is Julian, as always, and we are welcoming all our Measure Masters to this exclusive training. Today, we are going to talk once again about Google Analytics 4, the topic that probably everybody is waiting for to hear about. We still have a little bit of music going on, maybe in the background, and for that topic, we have we have grown our own expert, so to say, because we are working a lot with Google Analytics inside here, also preparing new training material for everybody and exploring, like you all are, the newest features inside of GA4 and how to handle certain things. So for that, I also expanded the team, and we have now somebody new inside of Measure Masters, inside of Measure School, and making training material for us. And you might have seen her face around already, and that's Sophia. So before I switch over to Sophia, who's already here, quickly about her. She joined us in February, and has been already getting used to all our different content production, from blog to videos to now the first live stream that she's going to be doing for us. Now, previously, Sophia has been working at a company who helps Google with their clients to help them set up tracking, set up analytics, and so on. And she has gained a lot of experience inside of the fields of Google Tag Manager, helping other clients from Google out to solve their tracking issues. And now she has joined Measure School. So first of all, welcome to this live training, Sophia.
Hi guys, I am really happy to be here, and this is my first live training, so I'm super excited. And yeah, I was working as an implementation specialist before, and here I'm a trainer at Measure School. So as you can see, I love solving tracking riddles, so this is my passion. But when I'm not digging into data, I'm spending time with my lovely dog, Shiba Inu, or maybe the Dogecoin doggo, and this is what I can say about myself. And I'm super excited to introduce our today's topic, which I found could be interesting for you, and this is user components in GA4.
Cool. And what is so? Oh, let's go from the top. When GA4 came out, what did you think about it? And then, are you still excited about it?
Yeah. So when it came out first, I was like, oh, this is going to be very interesting. And my life motto is to be, don't be a warrior, don't be a warrior, be a warrior. Like, everything with O.
Okay.
So because I was a bit anxious. Oh, so after those years of learning universal analytics, you have to switch to a completely new tool, and it looks so different. And I was a bit anxious, like, how am I going to do it? And back in the time, because this happened when I was working for the Google vendor, and we had to do also the migration, and people expected me to migrate their universal analytics to GA4 within 1 hour. So, okay, this is going to be a real adventure. But with the time, I started getting used to this tool. And right now at Measure School, I'm spending most of the time working with the GA4. So I can't say I forgot already universal analytics, but most of the time I devote to GA4. And I have to say this is fun, because it's understandable that many people, they feel kind of frustrated, especially when they have this extensive expertise, and then they have to start from scratch. It's never easy. So you have to push yourself out of the comfort zone. And this is what I also did. It was not easy. And actually, I'm going to show one slide in the presentation just to see how I feel about it.
Yeah, we are looking forward to the presentation, but I also just want to mention that you already have made a course for us inside of Measure Masters about GA4. So for everybody who is here from Measure Masters, they can already see that in the membership. And that's kind of the introduction. But we are digging deeper into these topics as we kind of go along with the topic of GA4. And that is kind of now a little bit of a training on a deeper level. So if you want to know more about Google Analytics 4, there are obviously hundreds of features that we can still go through, and we're planning on doing that as well. And Sophia has kind of picked one out here. So what are we going to talk about today, Sophia?
So today we will talk about user components in GA4 and specifically about user ID and how to implement it via Tag Manager and about user properties. And we will also implement those via Tag Manager.
Cool. All right. Then without further ado, let's take it away. Thank you, Sophia. And the stage is yours, so to say.
Oh, thank you so much. Can you see my presentation?
Yep.
Just double check. Okay. So this is the topic of our today's session. And I would love to say that I love adding a bit of magic to the workflow. And this is why I see the Google Analytics as a special galaxy, completely unknown. And we are the brave explorers there. So every day is like a new adventure because there are so many features and we're learning, we're discovering something new. So every day a new challenge. And this is exactly what I was talking about. And this is how I see myself learning new GA4 features. So I absolutely understand this is not easy, but what can we do? We cannot reverse this decision. And this is why it is extremely important to perceive GA4 with an open mind, because there is a common statement that GA4 is an upgrade of universal analytics. Yes, this is true in a way, but this is a kind of a new version of universal analytics. But at the same time, this is a completely new tool with a new data model, and this is why it would never be possible to have one migration, for example, and it would never be like fully equivalent to universal analytics. And when we explore new features, it's very important to have an open mind. And this is exactly how I see our workflow. This is how we are preparing our materials, how we are discussing different features, how we are trying to create new content for you. And this is never easy. And this is how I feel myself. Yeah, because we cannot reverse this decision again. And our solution in this case is to push back our capabilities to learn and to be professional. And today we will talk about user ID and user properties specifically. And I outline our learning goals. So we will talk about what user ID is, how we can implement user ID via Tag Manager, how we can set up user properties. And of course, we will have fun doing the implementation. So the first part is user ID. And I would love to start with the fundamental question. How are your users tracked in GA4? How are we collecting data about your users? So the good old way in universal analytics, or so-called standard way of tracking, was with the client ID. Yes, so the client ID is related to the device. So let's say Jane, a user, she would wake up in the morning and she has her phone next to her bed and she starts browsing your web page. Then Jane goes to work, she's working, and then she opens a new tab at the desktop and continues exploring your webpage. And then on her way home in the subway, she's having a look at your webpage with the tablet. And then in the good old way, the standard way in universal analytics would have 3 sessions, right? Because 3 different devices, 3 sessions. And it would not be possible, maybe due to tool limitations or due to cookies, to differentiate those sessions to say, okay, so this is Jane, this is one user. But this is exactly the beauty of GA4. And we have something which is called combined identity approach. And let me actually show it because it's just presentation, but it would be actually good to see it in the analytics account. So if we go to admin settings, and here we have something called reporting identity. And now you can see two options, by user ID and device and by device only. So you can choose which way you would love to identify your user. And let's dive into it. So let's try to understand what does it actually mean. Let me go back to my slides. And this is just a schema how it works. So if we choose the first option by user ID or device ID, so here we can say, I would love to use user ID, some kind of identification. So how can a system understand that this is Jane? This is one user, no matter what device she's using. Yeah, either tablet or laptop or mobile phone is still the same user. And this is actually technically doable with the help of user ID. And I can show you an example, yeah, because it's better to see a real life example. I have my web page, and here you can see we have some logging functionality. So I can say, for example, this is a Jane. Let me log in. And here we go. You can see Jane. So Jane logged in into the system. And this is how analytics would understand, okay, this is one user. It doesn't matter if she's using a phone or a tablet, because this user logged in with your system. And this data about the user would be saved in your CRM. And this is how you would be able to understand and to identify a single user journey. And this is exactly the topic of our today's session, and we will learn how to implement it, because this is the way how you can make your reports more precise, right? How you can see a single user journey in Google Analytics. Let's go back. So, what would happen if we don't have a user ID? Maybe you don't have any login functionality, but it's not even about logging, but it's about any user identification system. So in this case, analytics would fall back to Google Signals. What are Google Signals? So this is a way also to identify your users, to have this cross-device tracking, but it can be not that reliable. And let me explain you why. Because in order for this to work, a user must be signed in with Google. So this is number one. And then number two, the user should have personalized ads enabled. Yes, so two conditions. And this is not always the case. Yes, so this is the reason why it can be not that reliable, but still this is a good option for cross-device tracking. And then if Google signals are not there, so analytics would use the device ID. And this is the, what is this device ID? This is the good old client ID in Universal Analytics, or so-called pseudo ID of a user. And it is related to a device of a user. And of course, we cannot say that it is super reliable, yeah, because in this case, we would not be able to identify a single user journey. So this would be linked to a specific device only. Okay, so why do we need this user ID? Because this is all theory, but let me show you. And this is my test web page, as you can see. But to show the power of this feature, I want to show you the demo account of Magic School. So this is this one, because we also have user ID implemented, and this is the platform where you can actually have those courses. And I want to show you how it works. So if we go to exploration reports, and here we can find user explorer, and this is where I can see the information about my users. So normally, instead of app instance ID, I would see this pseudo user ID. but we have the user ID implemented on measure.school. And this is how I can see, okay, this is my user ID. And if I even click here, I can see what a user is doing on my web page. Yeah, it's loading, takes a bit of time, but you can see all events related to this specific user. And I think this is really cool and this is really powerful. Okay, so we will also implement the user ID, and this is why I have created my new property just for today's session. Let me find it. This is this user component, this one. And I have my tag manager here. I do have my analytics tag implemented already. Yes, so this is my analytics. So this is the configuration tag just here. And this is the web page we'll be working with. So let's do the first step. Let's go to the tag manager and we should preview our web page. So yeah, just to see what would happen when I log in. And let me provide my URL here. So this should be the correct one. Okay, Tech Assistant connected. Let's have a look. So let's go to Tech Assistant. So you can see my page is loaded. And if I log into my system again, let me, oh, I don't remember my password. I hope this is the correct one. Let's see. Yeah, this is Jane. You can see that this is Jane. You can see that she has the gold status in this membership. So, and you can see some information about this user. And let's go back to Tag Assistant and let's see what happens here. So when I logged in, you can see step number 8. And here there is a custom event, user login. So this was exactly my login. And here you can see the API call. And if I extend it, you can see event user login. And then I have user ID. So this is exactly what we would like to implement here, because it's not something that is done by default in GA4. So you have to set this up additionally. And in my case, yes, so we have a data layer and we have some data pushed to this data layer. In your case, you would have to ask your developer to to create a data layer with this data, or you can use CSS selectors, or you can also store this in cookies, or you can use a plugin that would create a data layer for you and would push this data to a data layer so that you can use it in the tag manager. So it depends on your situation on your web page. Yes, so in my case, I have a data layer. So my developer created this for me. Developer who is Prabha, so who is my colleague. Okay, so we can see that we have a user ID here. So how can we set this up now? So let's go back to the tag manager and we should create our variable. And here we would go user defined variables. We would click new variable configuration. And since we're working with the data layer, so this should be a data layer variable. And here let's go back to tag assistant. So you can see this is exactly user ID. Yeah, because I want to grab this ID, this one. Yeah, because it's dynamic and it's changing, so it will be different for a new user. And I want to work with this value. So I would paste it here, and it does not have to be user ID necessarily in this case. So you can provide any name you want, butterfly, sunshine, whatsoever. Just it's logical to use proper names, such as user ID, right? And here, let's provide a name. So I will say data layer variable. user ID. And let's save our variable. Great. So the variable is there. This was step number one. And step number two is going back to our tags. And here we should click tag configuration. And we have fields to set, field name, and here it's extremely important to provide user underscore ID. And you might be wondering, so why are we providing this under user in under fields to set this user underscore ID? And why do we have to have user underscore ID? Yeah, because it seems to be a user property. But so why should we provide it in the field name? Well, this is kind of data related to the user, but this is also a special feature of GA4, and you can always refer to the official documentation. So if you go to developer's guide, you can find the documentation here, and you can see, you can read it, and this is why we should also provide it uh, under the here field name and value. We should select the variable that we created for our user ID. Awesome. And we can save our tag. And also, two super important things to remember. Thing number one, yeah, so especially if you're talking to a developer and you want him or her to implement this for you can see that in my case, this custom event fires at step number 8. Yeah, and then my analytics fires at step number 9. Yeah, so this is extremely important to have this data available before your analytics fires, right? So that we can grab this data, so that we can work with this data. Yeah, because if it fires later, so we will not be able to take it. Yet to put it simply. So if your developer would implement a data layer, the code snippet should be before the tag manager, for example. So you should always discuss this with your developer because this is crucial. Thing number two, also super important. So as you can see, I have my user ID. Yeah, when Jane logs in. But let's say Jane is not logged in. So this is why it can be also not available. So in this case, you should not create any value when your ID is not available. So you should not create a value not logged in. No, just simply leave it. Yeah, because it will also cause some mistakes and malfunctions. Okay, so let's see what happens on the web page and let's click preview. Okay, it's loading a bit slowly. And let's go to analytics. And let's here maybe refresh because I want to use the debug view. So if we go here, hello, a bit slow. I'm sorry for that. This is because we're streaming and showing and using analytics and all those tools.
Just sing like no one is listening.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It just loading for ages. Sorry guys for that. This is not my
It's
fault, of
live.
course.
It's live. They all understand.
Yeah, you can see that this is live, so this is not pre-recorded. So okay, so let's go and click configure and debug view. So let's stay here. So this is where you can check, and also super important. So if you want to test to verify your user ID, yeah, and you want to see it in the debug view, please do remember that here you can see debug device and I have one. This is because I'm previewing my GTM container. So here we have three options how we can activate this debug device, because this is a very common mistake and this happens very often, that people, they say, oh, I cannot see the debug device. Yeah, because it's not enough to go to the debug view. You should also activate the debug mode. Yeah, because you might have multiple users, but you're the one who is testing this. So this is logical that you have to enable it. And one of the options is to preview with the tag manager, or the second option is to use the extension which is called the GA debugger. I'm not sure if we have it here. Oh, here, Google Analytics debugger. Or you can add a line of code. But the previewing or the extension are the two easiest options. Okay, so let me go back to my web page where I have my tech assistant connected, and let's go and log in again. This is my Jane. I do remember the password this time. Should work. Right, so this is Jane Doe. Very an unexpected name and surname. So let's see what happens in the debug view. So here we might have to wait as well. It might take some time for this to show up. Okay. Oh, beautiful. So you can see this orange notification user ID, and this is exactly our Jane. Yes, so we have this data about Jane in the CRM system, and we can also send it to GA4, and now we can see, oh, this is Jane, and this is how we can actually understand that she is browsing our web page, and no matter, it doesn't matter if she is using a mobile phone or a laptop or a tablet. Yes, so this is how we will be able to tell a comprehensive story about our user journey. So you might have a question, right? So we implemented user ID. Okay, we tested it in the debug view. Cool. But where can I see it? Hmm, that's a good question. And if we go to, I showed you already, and I don't have it here, but if we go to explore, and here we have a separate report for user journey, so to say, which is called User Explorer. So if you go here, so now I do not have any data because it's freshly implemented, or maybe it could show the alt data, we will see. Yeah, so you can see it, this is alt, but here we have the client ID, so-called client ID, or this pseudo user ID. Yeah, and this is interesting because I showed you measured at school, and there you could see the user ID because we have it implemented. But if you do not have it, you would see this ID, so-called pseudo user ID. And what is also interesting, do not be confused if you see this name app instance ID. Yeah, because why do we don't have an app here? It's a web page. Yeah, we don't, but you would see that app instance ID. So it doesn't matter if you have a web page or an application. This is just how it is in the reports in GA4 in the Explorer section. Then if we go to reports, if you have user ID implemented, you would not be able to see that specific ID here, like one single person. Let's say if you go to engagement, pages and screens. So one of the options that we have to be able to see the user ID is to create a comparison. And in G4, oh, it's okay, it's loading. Okay, so if I create a comparison, you can see add new comparison. And let's say I type user ID. And what we have in GA4, we have something called signed in with user ID. Yeah, so this is the data in total, in general. This is not showing one specific user, but if I select this option and I say it should be true, so I click yes, And let's click apply. So you would be able to see the data. I do not have it because it's like this was old when I was testing, but you would see the data here. And this is it. So you can see just, we can see if a user is signed in with the user ID. So it's yes or no. It would be then a Boolean, but we would not be able to see a specific user ID or a single person. Then the question is, so what should I do here? And one of the options is to create a custom dimension. And this is how we move to the next topic. But before talking about custom dimensions, I would love to make a short summary about user ID. So user ID is a cool GA4 feature, but it's available only if you have some user identification method, right? So as you saw in my case, this was some login functionality. So I had a web page where you could log in. And the second thing, that user ID must be sent with every event. So you could also see that I implemented it in the configuration tag of GA4 directly. So these are two key findings related to user ID. And I hope you do remember that we should not provide any values if a user ID is not set. And one super important thing also is not to mention any personally identifiable information when it comes to user ID. Super important. So this is according to the terms of usage of GA4. Okay, so we're moving to the second part, and we're talking about custom dimensions because, as I mentioned before, one of the options of showing a user ID in the reports is to create a custom dimension for it. Okay, but let's talk about dimensions. So, what is a dimension? Dimension is an attribute describing a specific aspect of your business. So, this is how you get some information about what is happening on your web page, right? And let's say you have had a look at all standard dimensions in GA4, and this is not enough for you to describe your specific case, as it was with Jane. Yeah, because as you could see, I have something called like gold membership on my platform. And I want to have this as an attribute so that I can analyze this data and that I can see this in GA4. But analytics does not provide that. So, what is the solution here? The solution would be creating a custom dimension. So, this is, you have all the power, you have all the flexibility. And when it comes to dimensions, there are two types. So a dimension can be event scoped or user scoped for now. What does it mean, event scoped? So event scoped describes a specific event, right? So I click add to cart, and let's say I add a product shoes or t-shirt. So this is exactly something related to an event. Yeah, but then I click add to cart again, and this would be a mobile phone. So this would be another attribute. So this is also changing. And user scoped, this means that we are attaching it to a specific user. And also, some good news for you. So this was Google announcement that Google is going to launch some new types of custom dimensions. So session and item scoped custom dimensions are to be launched soon. Yeah, so and this is coming back to the very beginning of the presentation when we were discussing the changes, right? The nature of GA4. This is constant learning. And the tool itself is under heavy development, and more features are to be introduced soon. Let me actually show this to you where I read it. because maybe you do not believe me. So if we go to configure, and when we create custom definitions, here, if we click create, and here we have scope, and we have a notification session, and item scoped custom dimensions are on the product roadmap, which is kind of cool. So we will see how it goes, but this is actually nice. So again, why would I need user properties? Yeah, because we were also having those measurement sessions, which are really nice. And this was a very good way of learning. For those who did not manage to attend, you can still watch a recording. And I would definitely recommend those to you because this is an invaluable source of information. So this is a very constructive discussion uh, related to GA4, and we have different topics. And we were talking about different events, and we were basically talking about event parameters, but we were never diving deep into user properties. So, this is why I decided to show it here. So, why do we need user properties in general? So, if you want to perform your analysis, you want to identify those sets of users, those user groups somehow. You want to filter out your users. You want to segment those users. But how can we say, okay, I want to see all users who have this gold membership? This is something which is not provided in GA4, unfortunately. And this is something that we would have to set up on our own, and this is just an example of user properties so that you can remember. I think this is good because you can create associations. So this is something that is describing a user. So we are attaching some attributes to a user. So this, you have a user, and then you can see the level of this user on your platform and the skill set this user has, for example. And here are some real life examples for you. So what could we have as user properties? So this could be pricing plan. Yeah, so let's say you're selling some packages of courses and you have different types of plans. Yeah, so starter, advanced, and pro. So you could it could differentiate that. Also, loyalty status, profession, date of joining, spender type. Yeah, so you might want to differentiate high spenders, low spenders, so people who spend lots of money on your platform, who spend less, user rating, or tier type, as this was the case with Jane. Yeah, so you could see that she had gold. Also, some something to be mentioned, which is also extremely important. This is some limitations. So you can create up to 25 uniquely named user scoped custom dimensions per property. So let's remember 25. And also, super important again. So I was talking about it before when we were implementing user ID. But again, so you should not display any personally identifiable information in your user properties as well your user ID, because we have some terms of services in Google Analytics, and we should comply with those. Then you might ask, okay, so I have my CRM. Yeah, so we are sending some kind of ID, but then I can go back to my CRM and I can pull that number and I still can identify this user. Yes, this is correct. And this is allowed because you're doing this in your CRM system. So this is kind of gray area. But if you're doing this in GA4 or in Google Analytics in general, this is not allowed. So you should definitely remember that. And please do not use any data such as name or phone or email or insurance number, because this is not the best practice. Okay, so now it's time for implementation, because we implemented our user ID, and let's implement our user property. So what do we have to do? Let's preview our web page again. Okay. A bit slow again, but here we go. And let me log in again. This time I will remember for sure the password. And here we go. So Jane is here. And let's see what happens here. Let's go to our beautiful events user login. And let's have a look here. So user ID is there. We implemented it already, but now we're talking about user properties. And I want to track a loyalty tier. I want to segment all those users who have special loyalty tier. How can we do that? So again, I have a data layer with the data pushed here. So I can grab the value. So this is changing dynamically. So I need this loyalty tier. So let me copy this one. Let's go back to our tag manager. And here we have variables. And we would have to click new variable configuration. And we're working with the data layer. This is why this is a data layer variable. Let's provide the name, which is loyalty tier, and my certain naming convention. It's not naming convention, but it's good to have something like that. So it's good to establish your own system of naming variables. So, oh, misspelled. Oh no. Data layer variable. Good. And here we have loyalty tier. So let's save my variable. And let's go to tags. Let's select our analytics tag here. And this time we're going to user properties. And here we would add raw. And you can provide any name you want here, but I will provide this name loyalty tier. And this will be my name. And the value, I will select my variable. And let's save it. Beautiful. So is this enough? No, this is not enough because this is not a user ID, this is a user property. So this was step number one. And if we want to have it, we in the analytics report, we should also create a custom dimension for that. So step number two would be going to admin configure custom dimensions. We should click create custom dimension. Super important here, you remember that we are attaching this parameter to a user. Dimension name, you can provide whatever you want, but I would provide loyalty to your description. Here you can write a novella. I'm just joking, but you can write the description so that it's easy for you to understand what you have implemented. And here you should provide it exactly the same name as it is in the tag manager and the user property. Please remember that. And let's click save. And now it's here. And let's go to our debug view. So let's see what would happen. Okay, so maybe let me go back to log out and I will log in again. Let's see what will happen. Yeah, it might take some time. So you can see that everything is loading slowly. But the important thing here is just to make sure that you set this up in the tag manager and then that you create a custom dimension in the GA4 directly. And please always choose scope user and it should be displayed in orange, but it's like a bit laggy today. I'm really sorry for that. Maybe this is because of my laptop or I don't know. Just everything is working a bit slowly, but this is just two main steps to remember when it comes to implementation. Again, no personally identifiable information in your user properties. And to sum up, so what have we learned today? So we have learned why we need a user ID and user properties in general. Yes, so we discussed what this is, and I'm sure now you can implement those via Tag Manager without any problems and verify if they're working correctly. And I'm super happy that you attended this session. Thank you so much for your attention because this was a special session for me. This was the first session from Magic School, and I will be happy to answer any of your questions.
All right. Big applause for Sophia here. We already had some questions. Well done on the presentation. And we can all see that GA4 is not the kindest tool to do live demos on, just because there are some delays in this tool. And sometimes it just takes some time till the data comes in. So if you have any questions, put them into the chat. We're happy to answer them. We had some question already. One was when you showed the user explorer, there was a name that you could see, right? You could see Richard was asking. Oh, okay, this doesn't show up again. Okay, Richard was asking, can I send the real name instead of the user ID? Jane was in the example, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This is the example of bad implementation. This is just for you to remember. Do not use any personally identifiable information in user ID. This is just as me playing with it and testing it before showing this to you. But now you can see that I corrected it and we have some number. Yeah, so the number which does not identify or reveal our user. I will show this slide again. But you don't need to see your user's identification.
Right. Sorry, the whole pop-up thing for the chat doesn't work today, so I'm just going to read the questions off here. Can you explain, and Anders is asking, can you explain why we put this into the user properties in the tag and not into the user, can you explain why user properties in the tag is not used to send the user ID, but the field to set option, right? Why are we using that option instead of the user properties? It's a bit counterintuitive.
Yeah, because it seems like a user property, like user ID, which is an attribute of a user, but this is kind of a special setting for GA4. And if we go, can you see my screen still?
Not yet. Let me just switch over here. Yes, now again.
So if we go to developer's guide, so if we do the implementation in the code directly, so you can see gtag config, and here we have user ID immediately. And this is why we should also implement it in the tag configuration tag. This is just according to Google's documentation, although it does seem counterintuitive.
Yeah. The thing is also, I guess maybe it's because the field to set option is something you put into the configuration tag, right? And the user properties are something that are kind of either sent with the page view, but they could also be sent with a special event over. But the user ID should always be sent. So it needs to be like kind of in the field to set option, so it can be configured. The tag, the Google Analytics tag can be configured first before you send any kind of events. So maybe maybe it makes more sense when you do a code implementation and they kind of just ported this over to their tag template, right? They have this new tag template, which is like kind of configuration tag and then your event tags, which is kind of cool, but at the same time, I'm missing the Google Analytics settings variable. Was a little bit easier to understand, I think so, but who knows if they're going to change something around at that point as well. So field to set is always something more on the account side, or how should the tracking code operate? Like, please use user ID instead of a client ID if it's available. And user properties are kind of properties for users specifically. So but would you then say, because we saw, and you saw that you told us that we cannot see user ID inside of normal reports, right? Because there is no custom dimension available. Would you then send the user ID as a custom dimension, as a user property into the system?
Yeah, so this is one of the options. But then I was reading the Google documentation and I was watching the Charles Farina's interview where he said that cardinality might take place if you're implementing a user ID as a custom dimension. So this is also a kind of philosophical question. So I'm still thinking about it, if this is a good practice actually. So this is a solution. Yeah, we will see if we set this up, we will see this in the reports. Yeah, so as a custom dimension. But then we also might face this cardinality, those discrepancies in the reports. Maybe.
Yeah.
I hope this will be fixed in the future, but we will see.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell. At the beginning, Google didn't show us any of the information about the client ID. We knew it was there because we are sending it into the system, but it wasn't available. Then they came out with the user explorer report, and that is the universal analytics days, right? And so they're now making it kind of available in the user explorer, but not in the custom dimensions. So it's kind of weird that it's not there, because you can still get all the information when you do a BigQuery export and see that data in BigQuery. So I don't know why they kind of hide it from us and just make that user sign in. Is the user ID signed in yes or no option in there? So who knows? Hopefully it will be available at some point, because people will start implementing it as a user property maybe, and then messing up their reports.
Yeah.
Cool.
But still, the tool is still under heavy development, so we never know what to expect. There are many cool features to be released in the future, and I really hope the tool will be improved with every passing day. So this would be really easy to use and to work with.
Cool. Then we had Giacomo was asking, do you also use something like a visitor login state in the user properties or visitor type? So would you recommend that? I guess visitor login state. So is the user logged in or not? And visitor type would be depending what, visitor type could be.
So if we have a user ID, so this parameter should be available in the reports and analytics, right? So we can see logged in with the user ID. So if you want to set this up additionally, it should be fine. In our case, for example, for Magis.school, we have those tiers. So this is what we're using as user properties, right? So we want to differentiate members, or so this was where we were using in the past.
Yeah, right? Yeah, true. But I think it's really there's really no, you need to do this. Well, if you want to utilize user ID feature, yes, you need to kind of implement it in this way. But when it comes to user properties, it really depends on your business. Like, do you have tiers? Then maybe have like a tier thing in there. Do you have, I don't know what properties a user could have. Maybe returning customer, if you know that, if the user is logged in. For example, an e-commerce shop, once the user goes into, let's say, an Amazon, they log in. Amazon has their user information, and then they could put into the data layer, oh, this is a returning customer. Or you could put a lifetime value in there or something like that, right? It's really open to the business requirements in the end. And I would always think about, how would you like to segment your users later on? Or how you showed that comparison thing, right? Is the user logged in or not? But if you have other properties there, like, how would you like to compare your users? Do you want to compare them by tiers? Do you want to compare them by users who are logged in or not? Do you want to compare them by lifetime value? Whatever. So this is a user property in the end, as you explained. So I think it's up to the business.
Yeah, so this is actually the beauty of GA4, because you have so much flexibility. And when we also talk about events, so in the past we had only category, action, and label, but now we have so much freedom. Yeah, it's just the matter of adjusting to the new data model. And then if you get it, so you can use it and you can use the whole potential. So you can unleash the whole potential of the tool, and this is beautiful.
Yeah, right. Okay, then Giacomo had a question. Let me see if I can. If you use GA4 to send data into server side, so not to GA4, but actually to server side, you just use the tag. And then, for example, for Facebook tags, and use it then for Facebook tags, you use the matching technique. We have to send the user data via GA4 to our container server side, right? Okay, I didn't quite understand the question, Giacomo. Maybe you could Did you understand, Sophia?
To be honest, not really, but Giacomo, please text me, and I will make research for you.
Yeah, I guess if you write Sophia on the Measure Mentor section, she will be able to help you out. So just to reiterate, so you're sending data from client side to server side, and then you have Facebook tags, and you use the matching technique. I guess either that's what is the matching technique? That would be my question right now. And yeah, so maybe you can follow up on this one, Giacomo. We are here to look at the chat. We had some discussion here about the counterintuitivity of field to set. Richard says the values we configure under field to set are additional configurations to the gtag.js. In the case of user ID is a field reference. Therefore, we would have to do that under field to set. Yes, that's a good analogy there. Then Richard says the user properties section in the config tag is for sending additional user properties, as it says, as loyalty tier, favorite football club. That's also a good one, depending on your business. So everything is a part, Anders says here as well, and everybody agrees. So yeah, that's a great analogy, Richard. That we are actually looking at the gtag.js when we look at field to set options rather than the user itself. So that's cool. Okay, if you have any kind of follow-up on this one, please write us in the chat. We also had questions here on YouTube. If I don't implement the custom dimension and the GTM data layer, GA4 still shows while comparing all users versus logged in users. So do you need to install the data? If you don't install the data layer and no custom dimensions, will Google Analytics still be able to know if the user is logged in or not?
Yes, so this is what a user ID for, right? So if we implement user ID, this is what I showed you. If you go to reports, you don't have to implement it additionally to the custom dimension. So you would be able to go to any report, even to standard reports, and there would be an option. Like if you add a comparison, you would write logged in with user ID. True or not true? Of course, we would not be able to see single user ID in this case, but we would be able to see all people logged in or not logged in together.
But just to reiterate, like if you don't set that up in the data layer, you will not be able to see if somebody is logged in or not, because Google Analytics by itself doesn't know if the user is logged in or not. It will just be tracking, right? So you need to set that up if you want to have that in there. And then user ID is something extra. You can also install that as well. Jangis asked, if I shift from Universal Analytics to GA4, then do I have to create all the audience again for dynamic remarketing in GA4?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, you would have to create, I guess. But there is no dynamic remarketing, as far as I remember, in GA4 for now, at least.
Well, you can build an audience, right?
Yeah, you can build an audience, but the feature itself is, as far as I know,
okay. I thought you can already do that, but I might also be mistaken. So
I haven't tested it, so maybe you can write it in the comments.
We should look that up. Yeah. Raul asked, what will happen if the user upgrade to another tier, for example, Platinum? Can we also have the changes to compare the user loyalty status to see the customer journey?
Yeah, to compare. That's a very good question, actually. Yeah, and it should be actually displayed in the report. So let's say, user property. This is an attribute that is attached to a user and it stays for a long time, so it persists. Yeah, and if a user change, so from that moment on, you would see like Platinum. So I guess it should be possible.
I'm
to
also curious about this, but
get.
yes, I would agree. I don't know if you can see it inside of GA4 directly, but let's say you do a BigQuery export,
Very.
right? And when you do BigQuery export, you get the user property from whatever session you are looking at. And at BigQuery is like kind of, it exports it into BigQuery and then it's set. Like Google Analytics doesn't go in and change everything around once somebody comes in and changes their plan. But then you kind of, when the user upgrades, first of all, I would fire an event, I guess, like an upgrade event, and then you would know, okay, this happened then and then for this user. And then the user has a new attribute. Now, the question would be inside of GA4 whether when you change a user attribute, will you be able to have two attributes in there, and like time comparison would tell you, hey, the user was this until then, and then it changed it over? Or is a user attribute always a user attribute and it will just overwrite it and then it will backfill everything from that one forward? That's an interesting one, and I don't know the answer as well.
Yeah,
It's something to try out, actually. That's a good idea.
yeah, well, this is a very good question indeed.
Yeah. So is there a way to see these loyalty changes inside of GA4? I would say right now, yeah, we would need to try it out to switch around. For example, the Jane example, to switch her to silver and then see if we can both see if how long was the loyalty of the silver and when did they upgrade to the new one. It would actually be a super interesting analysis.
Yeah.
You can definitely do it in BigQuery, I guess.
Yeah. You can do lots of things in BigQuery.
Cool. All right. Great. We answered all the questions from the chat, and we are also on time. So that's really cool to see that everybody pitched in here. Thank you so much. Oh, Giacomo just followed up here. When we use GA4 to send data into server-side container, can we, in this case, send personal information to retrieve it and send it in Facebook tags to increase quality matching? Okay. Or for Google Ads enhanced conversion matching.
To be honest.
I would say yes. That's an interesting one as well.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So what you do is normally we would say don't send any data to GA4 that is personalized information, like the email address and so on.
Yes.
And that makes sense because you don't want to send data to Google Analytics 4 that actually gets saved on their server that is personal identity. That would be against the TOS. But when you send personal information to your own server-side instance, and from there you not send it to GA4, but you send it to Facebook and to Google Ads, that definitely would make sense and would be allowed, I would say, as long as you're not sending it into GA4, because you're not sending it. And in that instance, you're just using the GA4 tag as a transportation tag to your server-side instance. You wouldn't be using GA4 tag to send data to GA4. That's my my opinion, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's valid, so it makes sense.
Cool. All right. Then let's wrap this up. Sophia, thank you so much for doing this presentation for us. I think the people here learned a lot, and I usually ask our guests, I was like, where can people find out more about you? Where can they connect with you? And what else do you want to pitch?
Yeah, so if you have any questions, so feel free to text me, and our members can text me also via email or in chat or in one-to-one coaching section, and I would be really happy to troubleshoot your cases or to help you find an answer to your solution to your problem.
Great. And obviously also Sophia just released a course on GA4, so you can check that out. And also she's part in our Measure Minds. So if you want to go back to the recordings, you can see that as well as a member of Measure Masters. And yeah, everybody who has been joining us today, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sophia. And for everybody who is watching us, thank you so much again for attending this session on Measure Masters for this month of May. Next month, we will have another training coming up, so you can look forward to this one. And for now, thank you so much for watching, and till next time. Bye, guys.